So Brian, tell me something good.
All right. Well, Bitcoin's going to the moon. No, I'm just playing. I mean, it is, but that's not what I'm here to say. Real quick, is my connection? I don't know if you saw that the video I was in the other day where my face kept freezing in different ways. Is it doing that? Is my face freezing?
No, you're not.
Okay.
You look
Okay.
fine to
Well,
me. Yeah.
you're gonna edit me and make me look good. No, you're like we're gonna give it to the people. It's gonna be raw. So, man,
Yeah.
yeah, I'm good. It's I'm Pacific time over here, so I'm just getting into my Friday right now and sitting down with you and talking Bitcoin. I've been looking forward to this all day. So I've been pumping out Bitcoin content. I'm reading a lot. I was reading a lot today, and so I was just like tweeting up a storm and putting out Instagram posts and stuff. But a lot of it was I was thinking through some of the questions that people were. I saw that it was yesterday you tweeted that out. It was about asking, what questions that you were going to ask me today, and I was reading through people's different questions, and some of them were funny, some of them were really like deep and impactful. Some of them I'm like, man, I have no idea how I'm going to answer that. So
Yeah.
I was all over the place, but thinking through those a lot, and it's just so fun. It's so fun to think through this and be challenged and have the ideas challenged. That's one of the things that I like to tell people all the time when we're talking about Bitcoin is like, please challenge what I'm about to say. Because that's the only way that I think any of us came to our conclusions right now that are pro Bitcoin was because we were willing to challenge our own thinking. All of us had a different way of thinking before. And so we're only here today because we challenged it in the first place. So feel free to continue to challenge it. And then once that refining process has been done enough, then you're going to be kind of left with the truth, And so that's the exciting thing about this is like, let's whittle away the excess and stuff. And so I love these conversations, man. Cameron, I'm like so stoked to start off my weekend with you right now.
Hey, me too. I'm so glad to have you as the first guest on the Bitcoin for Everybody show. So maybe for the next couple or few minutes, we could just talk about what's going on in the market right now. Bitcoin's been, it feels like we're hovering around this 1920K level forever. I know hardcore, Bitcoin people don't care too much about the price. We've got a, long-term perspective on it, but yeah, I mean, what do you think is going on in the markets right now? It seemed like the stock market has had a little bit of a rally over the past few days. You think that's just a relief rally, or you think we're actually maybe starting to bottom? Or
yeah, I mean, I think it's tough to tell how much of it's just from bots and like how much of it's human psychology. I think a lot of it, if we want to think of it through the human psychology lens, I think it's that people follow the madness of crowds all the time. And so when we're getting close to like a Fed meeting, or when we're getting close to a CPI report or anything like that, there tends to be this kind of collective, I don't know, like anxiety that revolves around the markets. And I think that dictates prices. And so we just had a CPI report. We just had some information come out. And then it's almost one of those things is like, no matter what happens, whether the report's bad or good, it's just the fact that people feel like, okay, I was so anxious and now I at least know the answer. Like maybe inflation was higher than we expected or whatever it was, and we were hoping for a lower number, but at least we know the answer now, and the world didn't fall apart. And so now we can kind of breathe a sigh of relief. And then that makes people, feel free to spend money, buy stocks, those types of things. I think it's a lot of that. I think every time that a CPI report comes out or any kind of bad news comes out, and then like the floor doesn't fall out on the market, it kind of reinvigorates people's optimism for the markets. And so I just remember a few months ago when it was the first time that the Fed did the 75 basis point increase. I don't remember which month that was in. I'm guessing it was like June or something like that, June or July. I remember I train jiu-jitsu almost every day. And there's a lot of like businessmen that are in the class, and we do a morning class. And so guys are kind of coming in either on their lunch break or whatever. And so I remember one of my friends, he's in finance. He works in merchant services, and he has a pretty substantial company in that. And I remember he runs off the mat because his phone was ringing, and then he runs out of the gym. He's dripping sweat. He grabs his bag in the middle of class and he runs out. And I called him like an hour later. I'm like, man, why did you run out of class? He goes, I have CEOs from companies all over the country asking me if they can have a job. And I said, well, what's happening? And he goes, oh, the Fed's going to raise the interest rate by 75 basis points. They haven't done this in 40 years, yada, yada, yada. And this guy was sheer panic. And then he said he sold every one of his stocks. He had a substantial, I don't know, it was a 7-figure plus portfolio that he has. He sold every one of his stocks that day, and sheer panic. And I remember talking to him a couple of days later, like, hey man, the market didn't completely collapse. Like, how are you feeling right now? He's like, I don't know, man. It was so crazy because everybody was kind of panicking at the same time. And I think it's kind of like an airplane. Like if you're on an airplane and there's a little bit of turbulence, if you look around and other people are freaking out, it's going to kind of make you freak out a little bit. But if you look around and like everybody's kind of a seasoned flyer and they're all, yeah, everybody's calm. Oh, well, I guess this turbulence is normal. That's how the markets are. That's how human psychology works. I honestly think that's what it is. I think it's people that they panic, they see other people panicking, and then they make moves. That also triggers bot trading and all that kind of stuff. And now the next question, I guess, would be, sorry to rob a question from you, but like, why isn't Bitcoin moving? I don't know. Like, why do you think the stocks are moving and Bitcoin's not moving? Because I mean, I guess I have some thoughts, but I'm kind of interested in what you think.
Yeah, actually, did you see that? I think it was came out today, the CNBC article about how Bitcoin has basically the volatility of Bitcoin is less than that of the S&P for the first time, and maybe the first time ever. I forget what it said, but yeah, it does seem like we've been just kind of. I got into Bitcoin in June of 2020, and we were just like in this 8-10K range for like forever, and it feels like we're kind of in this similar thing right now with like between 18 and 20K kind of just I don't know, it feels like we're kind of building a base here, but yeah, I don't know, I feel like Bitcoin has held up really well compared to a lot of other things.
Yeah.
Like
Well, especially other crypto assets, right? I mean, there's a lot of volatility, I think, still in the markets, but Bitcoin specifically seems to be pretty pretty stable. So
yeah, so what would you say to somebody that, and I give this a lot because everybody that I know knows I'm a Bitcoin guy. What would you say to somebody that's, just has the little smirk on their face that Bitcoin's down, like 60% or whatever, and that, oh, see, how's that a storehold of wealth, or
yeah,
how's that keeping up with inflation,
I love that question because it's like on its face, it sounds like it's like the checkmate question because look at, we're dealing with high inflation and look at Bitcoin's down. Checkmate, right? No, I don't think so. I don't think it's checkmate at all because I think exactly what you were talking about. Buying something as a storehold of value, you don't do it when the crisis is happening. Like you don't buy fire insurance when your house is on fire. You buy fire insurance before your house catches on fire.
Yeah.
People that bought Bitcoin as an inflation hedge bought it when you did. They bought it at 8K, 10K. They bought it at 4K during the pandemic. I mean, like in the heart of the pandemic, when there was people that bought on the day. That's why Bitcoin didn't stay at 4,000 forever, because there was thousands of people that bought Bitcoin at $4,000 when the price bottomed out. And those people, why in the middle of a pandemic, why in the middle of like the Fed saying, don't worry, we're going to stabilize the economy and all these lockdowns and all that kind of stuff. Like we're going to stabilize it so the economy doesn't shut down. Why were people buying that? Because they understood the only way out of this, the only way that you can shut a country down or shut the world down and not have an absolute depression is we got to turn on the money printers, or we got to turn on the money programmers because they don't print it. But like we got to type more money into existence. And so smart money, the Stan Druckenmillers and those types of guys, they were buying it as an inflation hedge at 4,000, 5,000, 10,000, 12,000. And so those guys, do you think they're mad at 20K? No, like as an inflation hedge. So people that bought Bitcoin as an inflation hedge are up anywhere from 600% to 150%. Amazing inflation hedge. And that's not even including all the people that were buying it as an inflation hedge in previous markets. Like I was buying Bitcoin as an inflation hedge in 2014, so I was buying Bitcoin as an inflation hedge at $275 a coin. It's been a great inflation hedge for me. The reason I bought it was because, wow, I'm buying a scarce asset. When you divide scarcity versus divided by infinity, like that's a good equation if you have the scarce asset. And so that's the people that bought Bitcoin. And I'm not knocking them. Like I actually bought some Bitcoin at 69,000 because I dollar cost average. I buy Bitcoin every month, or actually every couple of weeks. So yeah, I'm sure I bought some Bitcoin at 69,000. That's part of a dollar cost average. The people that FOMO'd in at 69,000 though, that they bought their first 10K worth of Bitcoin at 69,000. Yeah. Those people were doing it as a speculation. You and I weren't buying Bitcoin as a speculation, and most people in the Bitcoin community weren't buying Bitcoin as a speculation. They were buying it as an inflation hedge. Ultimately, the people that bought it at 69,000 are going to be vindicated if they don't sell. They're going to look like geniuses. I had plenty of friends that in 2017 bought Bitcoin at 19,000, and like here they are today, and they're break even. They, you know, some of them even got out when the price went high or whatever. I still don't think that was a good move. I think they should have held, but regardless, I love that question, because you just got to talk about fundamentals. Like,
yeah,
did you buy it as an inflation hedge, or did you buy it as a speculative thing that you were just boarding the hype train for? To me, it's pretty simple. It's a great inflation hedge. There's just no way around it.
Yeah, and compared to everything else, like if you use either the bottom, the 2020 bottom, or when the pandemic first hit, if you use that as like your kind of starting point over the past 2 years, Bitcoin has still pretty much outperformed everything other than maybe like some high flying tech stocks. I mean, anyway, yeah, it's but yeah, I mean, what is it the sailor says, like volatility is the price that you pay for outperforming the S&P by whatever percent over the past decade.
Sure.
But
well, yeah, I mean, I think that's good. And I mean, we were talking a little bit offline about people that we talk to in our lives that they say, oh, you're buying Bitcoin as a speculative asset and that sort of thing. I was talking to somebody about this yesterday, actually. I don't think Bitcoin is a speculative asset at all. It comes down to, if like a speculation is you're investing in something, you're betting on something that you hope might happen. When you and I buy into Bitcoin, we're buying into it for qualities that already exist in Bitcoin. We're buying into it for the immutability that already exists, the decentralization that already exists, the censorship resistance, the ability to transfer micropayments from. I mean, you do this every day with your Twitter account. I've done that as well. Like we have disintermediated the way that we advertise on Twitter. Instead of paying Twitter to advertise our Twitter accounts, we pay our users to advertise our Twitter accounts, and we've completely disintermediated. And so Bitcoin's already doing those things. We're not speculating by buying Bitcoin. We're buying it because it already has those qualities. So there's no speculation in Bitcoin. Now, the speculation is like, well, if you want to guess what the price is going to be, I guess we can speculate on the price in that kind of sense. But I'm buying something that already has those qualities. It'd be like if you went out and bought a Tesla and you're like, I'm paying, $50,000 for a Tesla today. I know exactly what I'm getting. I'm not paying $50,000 for a Tesla that someday I hope has like a rocket on the back of it. Like someday they're going to upgrade it so it has a rocket on the back. No, I'm buying it today because I already know what the car is. That's what Bitcoin is. It's not something, because I think people confuse this with companies. Companies are constantly in motion and they're evolving. So when you buy Apple today, Apple 2 years from now is going to look different. They're going to have different products, services, personnel, and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, you kind of are speculating on the fact that you hope that their technology is going to continue to improve. You hope they're going to continue to have good people. Again, Bitcoin flips that completely on its head. We're buying into the things that already exist and we hope don't change. Like that's the thing. We don't want it to change. Apple, you want it to continue to evolve. You want it to continue to change. We don't want Bitcoin to change. That's all we want, is like for it to stay the same. And that's kind of cool because it's really, really hard, if not impossible, to change Bitcoin. So I love that question.
Yeah. And like when you totally understand it like we do, it's really one of the safest things you could actually, you can actually buy. I mean, when you understand it at a really deep level. But anyway, I know we're kind of limited on time. Maybe we can get into some of the questions. I had some really good questions from my Twitter followers yesterday, and I've got them printed out right here. Maybe we can just get through as many as time allows. So, all right, this question comes from Janko. I may paraphrase this one a little bit, but when talking to people that don't understand Bitcoin, it is a struggle to explain how Bitcoin doesn't require anything to back it as a currency. I've tried explaining how a hard money does not require backing, like precious metals. I've tried to explain how energy can act as a backstop. Any hints, or you have any advice for that?
Well, Janko's totally right. I mean, his answer's perfectly acceptable. The problem is the uninitiated, the people that haven't studied this, that doesn't land well with them. And it's frustrating because you want to tell people, you're like, no, this is a phenomenal answer. Like this is, but you have to, most people don't even understand the problem with our current system. Like the fact that why does fiat currency suck? Because it requires no energy to produce it. Like until you've gone down that rabbit hole, saying that Bitcoin requires energy to produce it, like doesn't land with people. So when I just tell people, I think most people get hung up on the fact of there's nothing, I can't hold Bitcoin. And so I can hold dollars. And so therefore dollars are valuable. Well, let's do a little analysis. I always like to ask people, so you like encyclopedias then, right? You don't use Google, like encyclopedias are the way you get your information. Let me get like, well, why is Google more valuable to you than encyclopedias? Or why is Google more valuable than like, why is the market cap of Google orders of magnitude more valuable than the encyclopedia industry ever was? Like the encyclopedia industry maybe brought in like $40 million in a year, and Google brings in hundreds of billions of dollars in revenue per year. Why is that? It's because it's better. It's qualities, the attributes that make up Google are just simply better than encyclopedia. So it doesn't matter that you can't touch Google or you can't hold Google. Why do things have value? It's because of their function. Like it's not that you can touch it. It's not that you can eat it. It's, I mean, sometimes I guess it can eat it, but it's what purpose does it serve for you? If it serves a better purpose for me, then I'm going to use the thing that works better. Like, why is Bitcoin better than gold? I like gold, but I think a lot of Bitcoiners have a soft spot for gold. But why is Bitcoin better than gold? It's because I can't buy anything with gold because my gold coin is just far too valuable. It's not divisible enough. But with Bitcoin, you do this all the time. You send micropayments to people. You send lightning payments to people all the time. Every single day, you're sending dozens and dozens of micropayments. You could not do that with gold. You can't even do that with fiat currency. I can't send a 19-cent payment. I can't send a 9-cent payment to somebody through Venmo. It just doesn't happen. Like it just doesn't work. And it just takes too long. So it just comes back to, encyclopedias versus Google. Which one's more valuable? And it's just the same equation is fiat versus Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Try not to be smarmy like I just was right there. I was kind of smarmy. And so you got to be nice. We got to be gentle with the way that we say these things. But when we're in the Bitcoin community, we can talk a hard game.
Yeah, exactly.
Like we're tough.
Exactly. One of the things kind of following on that, by the way, the book, great book, by the way. I really appreciate you sending me this, and we got tons of stuff highlighted in it. But one thing a statistic that stuck out to me that I didn't know. I mean, I kind of had the idea that like a lot of people still probably knew that. People still probably thought that dollars were backed by gold. But what has he said? Like 33% of Americans still think that the U.S. dollar is backed by gold.
I had no idea it was that high of a percentage. But yeah, that's apparently from there's some Pew poll or whatever I cited in the book, but there's a few polls that show it's in that range. It's 30 to 40% of people, of Americans, think that we're backed by gold. So it's just a fundamental misunderstanding of the system. And where would people find that? Like, unless you ask the question, why would anybody even think to ask that question in the first place? We're not taught that in school. And so, I mean, I get it why people don't know that. It's frustrating because then we have to explain that to people and then it starts. But the good thing is, once you peel that back though, and people realize like, wait, I thought we were backed by gold. And then you say, no, like this system is like totally just faith-based. And then it starts to unravel, and then they'll eventually end up a Bitcoiner. So you just be hopeful.
It's patience.
Yeah.
All right. Next question. This is from Exalina00. Okay. Has the belief in Christ influenced the name of this book apart from the strong connotation of love for Bitcoin? I liked how you started to relate the book and the roots. So I'll kind of piggyback on that a little bit. So like the book is Bitcoin Evangelism. And great title for a book, by the way, because it does feel like we are, evangelizing, for Bitcoin, like, like Christians evangelize for, Christianity.
Yeah.
So yeah, how do you, I'm curious, how does Bitcoin align with the Christianity and Christian values?
Well, first off, where do you stand on that? Like, are you a Christian? You religious?
Yeah.
Or you
Christian.
Okay. Buddhist, you said? No, I'm sorry. Christian. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So yeah, I mean, I think there's some common language there. Yeah, I'm a Christian. I've been a Christian since I was in junior high. It's like 1999 when I became a Christian. Came from a kind of a rough home, like a great mom, crazy dad, but had an interesting upbringing, all sorts of fun things. But I think that yeah, like my faith probably prompted the title of the book, because I think in those terms, I think that what I believe is true. I think that it's important to think about what happens after we die. Like it's kind of a crazy thought that in the same way that people haven't asked the question whether our currency is backed by gold or not, like people also don't think to ask the question of what happens after this life, or does this life have meaning, or is there some greater purpose? And so as a Christian, if what you believe is true, then it compels you to share it with other people, because it's good news. Like that's what the gospel is. This word gospel in Christians, we call it Christianese. We use our own language, but gospel just means good news. And so if the bad news is, you're going to die someday, and that, you don't want to be separated from God, the good news is that like there's heaven. You can be in God's presence forever. And there's a really good light at the end of the tunnel type of thing. So that's a really hopeful message. That's a really exciting message. And so if we believe that, why wouldn't we want to share that with other people? Same thing with Bitcoin. I think Christian evangelism is more important than Bitcoin evangelism. But if we love people, and I think part of my calling as a Christian is to love other people, not just in like sharing about my religion, but just sharing things that are going to help improve their lives. I think that Bitcoin's a really high second place as far as importance, because it affects every area of our lives, like poverty. And one of the high commands of the Bible is to take care of the widows and the orphans. Well, widows and orphans, why are they so vulnerable? Because they're going to be subjected to poverty. And so I think there's a mandate in the Bible to help people that are poor, that help people that can't help themselves necessarily initially, right? They'll eventually be able to help themselves, but if you can help equip them with the right tools. So yeah, I think that evangelism is a really meaningful thing to me in terms of my faith, but it's translated into the way that I talk about Bitcoin, because I want to talk about it on a deeper level too. A lot of the book I talk about how our financial system is a morally corrupt financial system. Exactly. If you're a Christian, or if you're a religious person in general and you want to love other people, a morally corrupt financial system should be problematic for you, and you should want to fight for justice in that system. And so beyond that, though, just even talking about the practicality, Christianity is the most widespread religion in the history of the world. So it's a very successful message that's been broadcast to the world. So why don't we adopt some of the techniques that were used by Christians in terms of evangelism? You look through the history of Christianity, Christians tried to spread their religion through conquest. They tried to do why can't I think of the word? Crusades. Oh my gosh, why couldn't I think of it? The Crusades.
There you go.
The Christian Crusades. So yeah, they crusaded across the Middle East and were like chopping off people's heads, and they for some reason thought that would like help spread the love of God. It didn't work. And so like, I mean, when Christians were being tortured in Rome for their faith, they were being fed to lions. That was one of the biggest times of growth ever. And so I think we can relate that. We don't have that kind of persecution in Bitcoin, but you were talking to me off air, and I have this experience myself. Like people around us, they poke fun. They kind of say, oh, crazy Bitcoin guy or whatever. So it's persecution on some level, some very small level, but just this idea that if we're adopting something new, we're bound to face some resistance on it. And so this idea that we need to push through in order to love people, like that's a high calling, right? If we only love people when it's easy, and we only share the truth with people when it's easy, then, I mean, it's not very noble to do that. I think it's very noble to push forward and share things that are uncomfortable, that are ultimately going to help people. And so, yeah. And I think this idea of evangelism goes beyond that too, even in terms of like the Bitcoin altcoin relationship. There's Bitcoin maximalism, which would be like the religious zealots, man, like with our way or the highway, which I kind of fall into that camp to some degree, but I also, I think that it can become kind of dangerous to be so dismissive of other people that are interested by the technology. So I think it would be better for us to educate and like welcome them with open arms and say, hey, like we share some of the same values, and we share some of the same interests. Like, let's bring you into the fold. Where I think there's a lot of Bitcoiners that are just like, I just want to be super toxic. Like they openly say, I want to be super toxic, and I want to, make fun of ish coiners and that kind of stuff. And I don't think
Yeah.
that necessarily helps build Bitcoin in a really good way. So it's the same thing. Like we've seen Christians that have beat people over the head with the Bible, and then we've seen other Christians that welcome you in with open arms, and they're very loving and affectionate, and they're going to care for you. And when you need to move, they're going to bring their truck over and help you move. Like there's two different types of Christians. I think there's two different types of Bitcoiners as well. And so I want to try and fall on that side of like the guy that's going to hold to the values and the virtues and the tenets of Bitcoin, but I'm also going to try and help build Bitcoin by just casting a wider net.
Nice. I know we could continue that topic for probably a lot longer, but we'll try to maybe get into some more questions. But so anyway, great answer, by the way. So this question comes from Crypto Ruteros. It was actually in Spanish, so thank goodness for the translate button on Twitter. But this should be a quick answer. You actually have a section in your book about this, but what will happen when the miner's reward gets too small or even disappears? So
yeah, so just the transaction fees will be paid by those wanting to send transactions, and there's always going to be equilibrium on that. And I think a lot of people, that's one of the interesting things about Bitcoin. Like if you were to send, say if you were to come into my business today and you were going to swipe a credit card, Visa or MasterCard or whoever your credit card company is, they determine the fee. They say it's going to be 3%, 4%, whatever it's going to be. With Bitcoin, it's the opposite. If you were swiping or if you were paying me in Bitcoin, you would say, I want the fee to be 10 sats. I want it to be 0 sats. I want it to be 100 sats, whatever. You determine the fee. Now that also determines maybe how fast your transaction is going to get processed. But so just think about that. If people sending transactions are determining the fees, they know that they need to incentivize miners to operate and secure the network. So it's in the sender's self-interest to make sure that there's more miners getting more rewards. So people will find that balance. With how much, I think you're going to get a lot less people saying, I want a free transaction. They're going to say, oh, I'm going to pay a small fee, but I'm going to contribute to the miners. And imagine this too. People think, oh, well, if the rewards go down, nobody's going to mine. If all of a sudden all the miners left Bitcoin and you could mine, a block of Bitcoin on your PC right now, you would turn your PC on, you start mining Bitcoin.
That's the beauty
right?
of it. Yeah.
That's the beauty of it. And so it would become less secure, but then they would still be mined, transactions would still happen. So what would happen was all of a sudden everybody would find out, wow, you can mine Bitcoin on your PC. Then there would be an arms race to start mining Bitcoin on PCs. And then it would happen all over again. Then people would buy ASICs and then they would scale it up. And so there's always going to be this market equilibrium that keeps Bitcoin secure. But that, is going to go beyond just block rewards in terms of like the daily issuance of Bitcoin. The fees will be a significant portion of that. Yeah.
And also, I mean, the reward gets cut in half every 4 years, but, in theory, over time, the value, of Bitcoin will go up. So, there is like an equilibrium. And I think you had a chart in your book, right, about like the, what the reward will be and, way out. And it's crazy. It's like, especially when it gets down to like less than one Bitcoin a day, it's crazy. It's
there's a point at the end where it's 1 sat per block. Like that's a crazy thought. We just throw away sats right now. Like sats are just like inconsequential, but there's going to be a time where miners are fighting over a sat, and plus again, all the fees in addition to it. But so that chart, I actually tried to find that somebody that had made that chart. I couldn't find it anywhere. That thing took me forever to build out and do the math on and stuff. But I'm like, I think that's been people's favorite chart in the book, is just to see what that looks like over time. Because it just have a visual representation of the halving cycle.
Yeah. And to just think like, and whenever it is that 1 sat is the block reward, if that was the, today's equivalent of what the block reward is now, like, I mean, that's that is mind blowing. We probably won't be around, then, but maybe our grandkids.
You know what? I was thinking about this. It's funny now that I'm trying to produce Instagram and Twitter content all the time. My mind thinks in terms of memes now, which is like, I don't know if that's productive for me or not, but I was thinking about this and it's like a really interesting thought. So my grandpa and my dad and like every generation before, it's probably the same for you. They always talked about, well, back in my day, $1 could buy you X, Y, and Z. And now in like, you think about, well, what can I buy with $1 now? I can buy basically nothing. Our stories to our kids and our grandchildren is going to be the exact opposite story. I remember when 1 sat wasn't even a penny. Like we're not even going to probably call it a penny at that point. But I remember when one sat didn't, like, it was meaningless. And then your kids are gonna be like, dude, I can buy, lunch with like 5 sats. Like, what the heck, And so it's gonna be the exact opposite story. And so what's the difference between grandpa's story and our story? They're telling the fiat story. We're telling the Bitcoin story. It's so wild. And we've seen that happening. It's not like we have to like theorize that that's what's going to happen. I can already tell my kids that story. I remember when like sats were completely irrelevant. Now, because of Lightning, people on Twitter are starting to think less and less about the dollar value of it. And they're like, yeah, I'll retweet that for 100 sats, and throughout most of my time in Bitcoin, nobody cared about 100 sats. You would spend, 5,000 sats on a Bitcoin transaction fee and not even blink an eye. And now, yeah, I'll retweet something, I'll like something, I'll leave a comment because I want to get 100 sats. I want to get 50 sats. That's mind boggling to me that sats have become that valuable. And we're just in the early innings. So yeah, that's a whole, again, all these things we could go an hour on. Yeah,
exactly. Did you have time for one more question? Or?
Yeah, man, let's go ahead. Yeah.
Okay. I've still got a few more. Did you have any from the list I sent you that you would prefer to end on? Or
no, man, they're all good. We'll have to do this again and just save some of there was one that was kind of like anti. He was kind of being pessimistic. I like those ones.
I know what you're talking about. Yeah. Yeah. So this comes from Dogs Coin, and the question. I don't know if you call it a question, but it is Bitcoin is nothing more than a digital chain, and its profits mainly come from buying low and selling high. In the future, when the trust of consultants breaks, or when sovereign states declare Bitcoin to be illegal, it will revert to its original value and become completely worthless. Is that the one you're talking about?
Yeah, exactly that one. I have my thoughts on it, but I would legitimately, I think, honestly, your following would probably be interested to hear your thoughts in it, because most people probably haven't put a name or a voice or a face or a voice with your account. So, what's your take on this?
Yeah, putting me on the spot here, but
I know.
I'm kidding.
It's rude for me to ask questions when I'm not even the host.
No, it's okay. Yeah, no, it's hard to give a condensed version to the answer, because I could go hours on this. Like, how is something digital, actually valuable? And I guess it comes to the point of like Satoshi basically invented digital scarcity. Like before Bitcoin, you couldn't really have something that was scarce, digital, or at least something along the lines of that, because you could have basically what Satoshi did is he created digital scarcity, and just you got like the proof of work versus the proof of stake thing. Like it's just really brilliant what he did, and just the incentive structure for Bitcoin, and the fact that you actually have to use energy, because at the end of the day, money is energy. And so when you think of Bitcoin as like digital energy, because it actually does produce, it actually does require energy to produce. Like, why was gold so valuable for so long? It's not because it was shiny, or because it was smooth or whatever. It's because it's it actually does require energy to produce, and it's not like seashells. You can just go pick them up and they're abundant. There's only so much gold, but you don't really know how much gold there is. There could be a lot more. There could be 100 times more gold than we even think there is. And so with Bitcoin, it's the only thing that's like truly 100% that, and 100% verifiably scarce. So that's just the one aspect of it. And then get into if you want to say it doesn't have value, what's the value of being able to send a 10 cents transaction all the way across the world in a split second? Like, how much does it cost to send, try sending $10 or $100, or try sending 10 cents to somewhere in China, or somewhere in Singapore. Try to do that, and then without Bitcoin or without the Lightning Network, and then do that with the Lightning Network, and see if there's a value to that.
Yeah, that's spot on. That's so true. Like you're talking about, there's like a real tangible value. I think people think the value is so abstract in Bitcoin. It's not. It's like it's a very tangible value. But even the question itself is, I know the user was kind of setting us up. I don't think he was antagonistic, but he was asking a good question. You know, yeah, it's kind of a fundamentally flawed question. I think when people ask that, they think of it like, oh, I only make money in Bitcoin when I buy low and sell high. It's like, no. Like that's,
if you really know
you're
Bitcoin,
getting
you
more.
never sell.
Yeah, right. You're getting more. If you're doing that, you're technically holding Bitcoin at some point, but you're not a Bitcoiner. You're a fiater at that point. And I'm not saying that to disparage anybody. I'm just saying, just so they know what camp they're in, you're trying to accrue more fiat. That's your goal. Okay, you're just accruing more of an asset that's you know, melting away. Like when I buy Bitcoin, I buy it and hold it. The Bitcoin I told you about earlier that I bought in 2014, I haven't sold those. I own all of those Bitcoin. The only Bitcoin I've ever that have ever exited my sovereign holding of them is when I bought something. I bought furniture with Bitcoin before. I bought a few different things online. Whenever I can buy things in Bitcoin, I'll do that. I'll tip my kids in Bitcoin. And I use it on Twitter. I use it on Twitter all the time. That's the only time I ever get rid of Bitcoin. And it's because I'm using it. Like it's money. Then it's proof that it's money. And so, yeah, I think it's just one of those things where there's a great meme. It's like the Matrix meme where he's got the red and the blue pill. I don't know if you've seen that one.
Yeah.
And he says something about how, let me tell you about, you know, he's like, is Bitcoin going to be worth, you know, $1 million someday? He's like, let me tell you, someday you're not even going to have to sell Bitcoin. I totally butchered the meme, but it's essentially talking about how when it fully realizes its value, you're not going to have to sell it. And that's what I remember telling my wife when I first bought Bitcoin, and she's been on board ever since. I remember saying, these are going to go up to $10,000 a coin someday. And that sounded like a crazy thing at the time. And I said, just so you know, our plan's not to sell them. She said, okay, like why? And I said, because we know the perfect time to sell them is just when we buy stuff with them someday. That means they've actualized, they've realized their value when we're using them to buy things. And so it's a really simple calculation. Like, when am I going to get rid of my Bitcoin? When I get a good or a service in exchange for it, because then I'm getting maximum return on my Bitcoin. And even in terms, if you want to think in fiat standards, like I like to talk about that all the time. I have a chain of light therapy service businesses in Southern California. So we do like UV treatments, red light therapy treatments, infrared sauna, all this kind of stuff. And we're just a 3-store chain right now, not a huge business. We do about $1.2 million a year in annual sales. So it's like not small, but it's not big. We spend about $50,000 a year on merchant fees alone, just to accept credit cards. So just every time somebody swipes a credit card transaction, we pay a fee for that. That comes to, at the end of the year, $50,000. Wow. In addition to that, we don't get paid for 48 hours to like 96 hours on those funds when they come in. And so we have to carry so much extra capital in our accounts to float that process. So what does it mean to me as a business owner to be able to accept Bitcoin? Well, at the very least, it's worth $50,000 a year. Yeah. Like that's how much value Bitcoin for my business alone brings to the table, aside from how much it appreciates in value, but just in terms of its transfer value, the value transfer of Bitcoin has a 50,000. What does that mean for Walmart? Like my business is tiny. Walmart does billions of dollars of transactions a year. This means you're talking about it's hundreds of millions or even billions of dollars of value to those companies, that individual company, for just its value transfer properties. So yeah, I think in terms of like buying low and selling high, we're thinking through the fiat paradigm still at that point. And so that's just usually how I answer that, is kind of like restructuring the question a little bit.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah. And another great thing about Bitcoin is like just, you've got it's like almost like two investments in one. You're investing in like this technology that allows for instant settlement, cross-border payments, micro payments. And so, I mean, just that, like compare that to, you know, Visa, you know, American, like all these, I mean, you know, all those public companies add up to probably nearly $1 trillion in market cap. And so, I mean, that's just like one feature of Bitcoin. The root of it is, it's the only thing that's, you know, truly scarce, truly decentralized, that you can actually secure on your own without anybody without worrying that anybody will take it away from you. And nobody can take it away from you as long as you're securing it correctly. But so that in itself is just a huge value proposition right there. Like you know, like, but anyway, I know you've got to get on to your next talk, Brian, but I really did appreciate this, and we'll definitely have to talk again soon. Or sometime, you know.
I'm always open. I always make myself available for a good Bitcoin conversation. So yeah, I appreciate it, man. Well, thanks for letting me start my weekend off the right way. I'm going to do another podcast right now. It's like a finance podcast where they, I think they touch a little bit on crypto, but mostly stay in like the general realm. I love that. I love being able to bounce back and forth. I get refreshed with my Bitcoiners like you. But then I get to go like evangelize a little bit on these other channels. So thanks, man. I appreciate you getting the juices flowing for me here.
Hey, glad I could be of service, and thank you again so much. And yeah, have a good one, Brian.
All right, brother. Have a good one.